Hello and welcome to another seasonally appropriate episode of Saved by the 90s. My name's Adam Patterson, and this month I'm joined by a guy who I'm very thankful is my co-host on this journey, Mr. Ken Bakley. Hey, Ken.
Hello.
November is here once again, and while I still believe my birthday should be the biggest holiday of the month,
It is.
I know. It's also Thanksgiving time in the U.S., and we have 4 holiday-themed movies to talk about, along with a couple of TV shows to decompress. So gobble up that turkey and awake from your tryptophan coma, because this is Saved by the 90s.
It's Macy's Great Thanksgiving Week sale, and we're saying thanks to all our customers with sensational savings on all electronics. Save on TVs, VCRs, stereos from the best names: Sony, Magnavox, Panasonic, RCA, and more. Savings that brighten your holidays. Get RCA's 20-inch remote TV for just $249. Macy's Thanksgiving Week sale, now through Sunday. Nobody celebrates Thanksgiving like Macy's.
We're a part of your life.
What does that even mean? Nobody celebrates Thanksgiving like Macy's.
I guess it's a reference to the parade.
I guess, but that's such a weird... That's such a weird line to end on.
I just like their slogan, "We're a part of your life."
That's a threat, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I want to be clear. Our first title this month is the second feature directed by Jodie Foster and was adapted from the short story by Chris Radant. Released on November 3rd, 1995, and starring Holly Hunter, Anne Bancroft, Charles Durning, and Robert Downey Jr., this is Home for the Holidays.
This holiday season,
Dear Abby.
Oh, Mom, not Abby.
comes a celebration of the American family
I'm glad he's waiting. We gotta go.
and everything they put us through.
When you go home, do you look around and wonder, who are these people? Where did I even come from?
From director Jodie Foster,
Into the house. Everyone, before we're in the evening news.
Home for the Holidays. Rated PG-13. Special sneak preview Saturday, October 28th.
After losing her job, making out with her soon-to-be ex-boss, and finding out that her daughter plans to spend Thanksgiving with her boyfriend, Claudia Larson has to face spending the holiday with her family. She wonders if she can survive their crazy antics. Ken, we'll go ahead and start with you. What did you think of Home for the Holidays?
I have seen this movie twice now. I actually saw it last year, like right before Thanksgiving, right around this time. And I knew I did because I remembered watching it, but I didn't remember a single thing about it. It's a perfectly competent movie. It sort of branches off into too many directions. Like every act, it seems to reinvent itself. Like first it's about, it's an examination of like these characters coming together. And then it's sort of about the Thanksgiving or just the actual dynamics of them together. And then in the last act, it kind of becomes like 2 different movies entirely, neither of which seem to be really about that family more than tangentially anymore. It's a very confusing movie from a structural standpoint.
This was kind of interesting. I've never seen this movie before, at least to my knowledge. I don't remember ever seeing it before. So this was a first time watch for me, and I knew that it was based on the short story. So I actually read the short story before watching the movie because I was reading about how Jodie Foster and who's the screenwriter, W.D. Richter, were adapting the short story, and they were like talking about what a mess the short story is and like how they were trying, like how it was a real challenge to take that and turn it into a movie. So I was like, all right, well, I'm really curious, like what is the short story? How does this play out? And it is an absolute mess.
Why did they adapt it? Was it like a self-imposed challenge?
Like the short story is funny. It was actually an article it was a newspaper. I cannot remember which newspaper it was in. I want to say it was like an Arizona newspaper or something like that. That's terrible. I can't remember. Anyway, it's more like a stream of consciousness type of thing where the writer, Chris Radant, was like, she was just kind of going through the thoughts in her head as she was going on this trip. And I think that they did a serviceable job of adapting it. I mean, a lot of the stuff that happens in the article is in the movie, like the specific very specific things, like certain lines and things. But I found the movie to be kind of messy too. Like I thought the movie was just all over the place, and the energy level of this movie was just so exhausting to me. Like I couldn't handle this movie and the level of energy that it was bringing to me.
Yeah, it's odd that it's adapted from a short story because as a movie, it feels so much longer than it actually is.
I mean, it's an hour and 43 minutes
It
long.
does not feel like an hour and 43 minutes.
No.
It
So,
feels, it feels like it sprawls.
yeah, a lot happens. A lot happens in this very short time span here
Which
with
then, yeah, circles back and makes it hard to process.
yeah. So you have Holly Hunter as the lead. She's Claudia. And the relationship she has, the family dynamic is so odd. Like maybe it's just how I was brought up and my family dynamic, but I just could not get over how incredibly intimate these people were with each other. Like especially when Robert Downey Jr., who plays the brother, when he first comes over and he's like taking naked pictures of her, like he's taking pictures of her in the shower. He's like lifting up her shirt and taking pictures of her when she's like sleeping and stuff.
It's so upsetting. It's
And
so
I'm just
upsetting.
like, is this really what I mean, my wife has a younger brother and they would never in a million years
Nobody would.
do such a thing. And I thought it
This
was
is
just
a
so
family that exists
strange.
in the confines of this movie, because it tries to kind of cut both ways. It's all a deeply. They want to have a movie about a deeply connected and intimate family, and they also want to have a movie about the hostile and dysfunctional family. So from scene to scene, they can be both. It depends.
Diving a little bit into the dysfunction of the family, I was never really thinking that they were that dysfunctional. Like they didn't seem too wildly different than your typical American family.
No,
And
but yeah, what's weird is the movie tries to play it up as though they are, when there are really only a couple of scenes where there's genuine discord.
yeah, the scene that sticks out, I mean, it's sort of a big crescendo that happens where they're all eating and Robert Downey Jr.'s character is trying to carve a turkey.
It feels like August Osage County.
Yeah. His name's Tommy, by the way, and he says he doesn't know how to do it, but he's trying to do it anyway because Charles Durning's character, the dad, has problems with his wrists and whatever, and he's trying to carve this turkey and he like slips and he flings the turkey and it hits his sister and she like loses her mind and it turns into this like big blowout thing. And I'm just like, what is going on here? This has escalated so quickly.
Yeah, it really is a movie that tries to cut both ways. Like it feels like the dynamic of the family is entirely dependent on what it wants to depict next, and just covering its like omnibus of tropes about families and movies.
Exactly. And I just wasn't buying a lot of it. And Holly Hunter's character, I mean, she was great in this, but I never quite understood her mindset either because she seemed annoyed and depressed and she's going through a lot of stuff with work and the fact that she tried to kiss her boss and all of this stuff and dealing with her adolescent daughter led by Claire Danes. But the whole time she's like joking and smiling and like laughing, and it seems like she's actually genuinely having a good time, but we're led to believe that she's just miserable and she doesn't want to do this family dinner thing and she doesn't want to really be there. But it's like what we're watching on screen is her seemingly having an amazing time with her family. So I felt like I was just getting a lot of mixed messages constantly while watching this.
Yeah, when I saw it last year, I seem to remember liking it more than I did this time. I think because what did work, like maybe the jokes that did work or the moments that really worked for me, they were no longer fresh to me. So it was one of those movies where I thought it was just on the right side of being fine when I saw it, and then I watch it again, and and at first I didn't, like I said, I didn't really remember it. And then as I was going through and it started to come back to me, all I really had left to pick up on were like the structural problems that just seemed more apparent this time.
Yeah, and it's not to say I didn't like this movie.
No, I think it's fine. I was right when I was perfectly in agree when I said at the start, I think it's fine. It's just that it's kind of hard to talk about the way that it's just fine because it's perfectly like functionally accomplished as a whole. But to talk about it in detail, it feels like the only thing you can default to are just these very strange choices that it makes.
Yeah, I liked Geraldine Chaplin's character as Aunt Gladdy, who is completely nuts.
Mm-hmm.
How she has the Fruit Loops necklace and the she keeps giving them lamps as gifts. I love that. You go into her house and come out with a lamp.
I believe the blessing that she gives at the actual dinner is an incredible monologue.
Yeah, and the fact that she just keeps hitting on Charles Durning's character, like,
and then keeps going back to it
non-stop, just hitting on him over and over again.
Like in my mind, because once again, this movie doesn't really have a firm structure. In my mind, I know that's probably spread out through the scene, but in my mind, that is all just one continuous monologue is how I remembered it. But if it was all one monologue, then I think that she should have received awards consideration that year.
There's also a fart scene involving her, which was pretty funny for a fart scene. I enjoyed that. There's also a scene. So Dylan McDermott is in this, and he plays Robert Downey Jr.'s friend, like business associate. His name's Leo Fish in it. And there's a scene. So like he's obviously a love interest for Holly Hunter's character, and they're kind of hitting it off. And there's one scene towards the end where he has something in his teeth, and she picks it out of his teeth, and then he eats it. And I was so disturbed by this scene.
Yes.
Like, again, these two just met each other. How is this happening? How is she picking stuff out of his teeth and he's eating it? Like, that's gross.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. We are just several minutes into this episode, and it already feels like we have found scenes that are more personally devastating than anything in The Ice Storm, which we'll talk about soon, a movie that is meant to be deeply devastating and is, but it has no such scene where that thing that you just described happens.
Yes, that is correct. Steve Guttenberg's in this because wouldn't be well, this is the mid 90s. Yeah, I guess Guttenberg was still pretty prolific throughout the 90s. He doesn't have much to do in this, but he's still pretty funny, I guess.
Yeah.
And other than that, I thought, it's fine. It has its moments, but it's just a little bit too all over the place, a little bit too wishy-washy for me. If I want to watch a holiday comedy, with a crazy dysfunctional family, I'll watch like National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation or something of that ilk. This one just didn't work for me altogether, but I'd still say I might give it a light recommend.
Oh yeah, I think for all of the criticisms that I just said, I think on the whole it's competent, it's fine, it's well made, it's well acted, it's just kind of confusing.
After being nominated for 7 Academy Awards for his adaptation of Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility, director Ang Lee followed up the romantic period piece with a stark familial drama set in a small Connecticut town in the early 70s. Released on November 26, 1997, this is The Ice Storm.
Next stop will be New Canaan, Connecticut. New Canaan, Connecticut, next stop.
Once there was a time when families were strangers.
Paul?
Hi, Dad.
Guy? I'm just confirming you'll be on the 440 on Wednesday, right?
So you and your sister can mope around the house, and your mother and I can wait on you hand and foot, while the two of you occasionally grunt for more food.
Neighbors were lovers.
I think Elena might suspect something.
Is that a new aftershave?
Yeah. Musk or something.
And America was learning the truth.
Are you watching this?
Watching what?
Nixon doofus. He's a liar.
Calm down, I wasn't in on it.
It was 1973, and the climate was changing.
Care to play? It's strictly volunteer, of course.
A key party? The men put their car keys in a bowl, and at the end of the evening, the women line up and fish them out.
In the weekend after Thanksgiving in 1973, the Hood family is skidding out of control. Then, the worst ice storm in a century hits. Adam, let's start off with you. What did you think of the ice storm?
First of all, I thought that trailer sounded way too chipper.
Oh
Like,
yeah, this movie is
the
devastating.
The narrator of that. I don't know why they would choose someone to
reading it in
with
that like
voice.
especially or just the person that they chose to read it in that register.
Yeah, they make it sound like it's this kind of maybe even a dark comedy, like it's the 70s. They were a different time.
No, this is one of the most harrowing movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean this is a movie. When it came out, all anybody ever talked about was just how depressing it is. They're like,
It really is.
Have you seen the ice storm? Oh my god, like, it's so depressing. This is the ice storm is actually one of my dad's favorite movies of all time. He adores the ice storm, and
It's great.
I do too. I will say, I was really excited to revisit this because I haven't seen it in years and years and years, maybe since like shortly after it came out. So it's been a really long time for me, and I was so excited to go back to it. And I would say, surprisingly, out of the 4 movies that we're going to discuss, I thought that all of them actually held up pretty well over time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Home for the Holidays maybe was the one that felt the most dated to me, but certainly the Ice Storm didn't. I didn't feel like it was dated at all. Now maybe that's because it takes place in 1973, but it still felt very relevant.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been possible for it to feel very dated. It's about very abstract subject material, like people feeling completely disillusioned and volatile by the upheaval of society and massive social changes while there's a corrupt president who hates the media in office. I mean, how on earth could that possibly be relevant to life in 2019?
I know it was kind of funny actually when you see it and you're just like, oh man, there really are a lot of similarities between, Watergate and all of that and what's happening now. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. I think, I agree. This movie's great. I think it's one of Ang Lee's best movies. One thing that I feel like that I think does get discussed a lot when you're talking about this movie, but I think the one thing that the plot summary that they have online kind of moves over a little bit. It's not merely a small town in Connecticut. It's a small, very wealthy suburb of Connecticut. It's New Canaan, which I believe is one of the most affluent towns in the country. It's a real place. And I think that's kind of relevant because these are people who have a lot of material comfort, a lot of stability, a lot of leisure time. And yet throughout it, there's this juxtaposition between their level of access and the presumed level of comfort in society and how yet still at the same time there's this just an absolute just universal sense of feeling lost and empty that kind of carries through the whole thing. So there's almost if there's anything darkly comic about the movie, it's almost that sense of juxtaposition, which a lot of works try to do. They try to say, look at these rich people and they're really miserable, and most of them fail at making that interesting. This one kind of does because it's a element that's there, but it's not a central element, but it's something that really flavors the feel of the movie. And not to say that it's not outwardly negative towards its characters, but to put this as nice a way I can say this, it kind of makes them feel more pathetic.
Yeah, I completely understand that. I think that this is an immaculately told story about some rich white people in Connecticut who somehow don't know how to deal with an ice storm. That's, and it's funny because there was a movie that came out. I was just trying to remember it. It was a Netflix movie with Ben Mendelsohn, and it's another one of these movies where it's The
Land of Steady Habits. I don't know why I remember that. It is completely forgettable, but I saw it.
That's the one.
I can't. Yeah, I can't tell you a single thing that happens in it except it's set in Connecticut.
So in a movie like that, I don't think they're able to accurately evoke any kind of empathy or any feelings towards these people at all, because you look at them and you're just like, why are they miserable? They shouldn't be miserable.
Yeah, it's also because it's just focused on like the one, like it's just focused on like the one guy. It's the one Ben Mendelsohn character. It's like in a story about more of those characters equally, it focuses on someone who my only takeaway that I can remember, this is probably the least interesting character in this movie.
I think that this movie does such a great job of navigating through the lives of all of these people who all have very different problems, different desires, different everything. And it handles each one of them with such a level of grace and detail. I just think it's so incredible what they did with this really great ensemble of characters.
Absolutely, it's so meticulously thoughtful, because it isn't, like I said, it isn't just accessing that juxtaposition for the sake of it. It is not showing it off. It's like it's like one of the fundamental building blocks that it doesn't need to expound upon, is that their problems all seem to be like a series of juxtapositions, and it's just a lot of characters sort of floating around in this very tentative time where the kids, like the kids are already going through like the thick of adolescence and all of its like confusing and volatile ways, and they're not really getting much guidance from their parents, because their parents are also dealing with like the broader like social upheaval that they're not really sure what direction they're going in either.
And you have this really great cast to round out these characters. You have Kevin Kline, Joan Allen, Sigourney Weaver, who is an absolute queen in this movie. Oh my god. Tobey Maguire, Christina Ricci, Elijah Wood, and of course David Krumholtz, who we'll be coming back to 2 more times after this one.
This is the David Krumholtz podcast now.
This movie's it's such a stirring, nuanced portrayal of an American family life, like upper middle class American family life in the early 70s. I also think that it's just funny that one of the big elements of this is, as the title suggests, a big ice storm that's coming in. And at one point, the one guy goes, "Let's go for a drive." And you're like, it's an ice storm. You live in Connecticut. You should know that no, let's not go for a drive.
Presumably not your first winter storm.
Just crazy that they're just like, all right, let's go for a drive. And then, like, you know, you have Elijah Wood's character, Mikey Carver, the ice storm hits, and he's just like, I want to go out, see what's going on with these molecules. Just gonna see what happens.
You can't trust those molecules.
And like, we knew they set it up, like Ang Lee set it up, that we knew something was going to happen to him, but I kind of wish that nothing did happen to him. But like, it just seemed so obvious that he was something awful was gonna befall him. But they also it's funny because like his brother Sandy seemed like a complete psycho, and for a minute you think that this kid's gonna do something. He's gonna blow up their house or something.
There was a high penchant across a lot of this movie for something to be blown up, and it is kind of incredible that nothing ever does.
Yeah, I'm surprised more people weren't killed in this movie, because it feels like everyone is in so much peril all the time.
Well, that's the thing, is that for so many of them, the peril continues because it ends with most of them just still there. They have to keep going.
Yeah, I thought that the end was really incredible. How it's the same. It opens the same way. The opening shot is actually the final shot or final scene in which Tobey Maguire is coming back from spending the evening in the city, and at this point, like his whole family knows that Elijah Wood's character was killed, and but he doesn't know. And just the look on everyone's face, and just how in the car ride Kevin Kline just breaks down in the car. I mean, people who talk about this movie being depressing, like they're not kidding around. Like this is such a stark, just it's a movie that just beats you down.
And what makes it that much more devastating is that there are so few like heightened, like deliberately outwardly played emotions. These are all feelings that in the course of being a human you can recognize. Like that's this. I feel like I understand the gist of what this character is feeling, and the seeing just kind of powerfully on the outside, it just looks like nothing because you're not expressing anything outward.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film in a lot of ways too.
Yeah.
The one scene that always strikes me every time I see it is in the beginning when Tobey Maguire's on the train and everything is iced over and the train starts to move, and you just hear every little crack of the ice as the train car starts to lurch forward. All of that stuff, I mean, especially when the ice storm really hits, I think is just so wonderfully done. And I think that it makes everything just more impactful. It's such a powerful movie.
Absolutely. I want to say I saw it for the first time all the way through either late last year or earlier this year. So I might have seen it twice in 1 year, which is a lot.
That is a lot to deal with.
It's a lot.
I mean, this is definitely a movie that I can see myself revisiting.
Yeah.
Multiple times. Just because it's so well made, but man, you gotta be ready for it.
Oh yeah. I believe I want to say the last time I watched this, whether it was late last year or earlier this year. I did not plan it this way, of course, but just the way that my schedule worked out that day. Also, the first time I saw it, I believe I like went right up against my schedule because I had to like leave the house right after I finished it because I had to go see my therapist.
I imagine if that was me, that whole session would just be about the ice storm.
Yeah.
I just feel like look, I can see myself in all of these characters, and I'm just so I feel like I'm going nowhere.
Yeah, what's so devastating is just like I said, just seeing what like the most volatile emotions that you can feel on the inside look like on the outside if you're not showing them, and it's nothing. Like it's just almost completely neutral, but just a movie that has the confidence to make that connection, and you also know that that's not all there is, or that they're not feeling dull. They're feeling quite a lot on the inside, but it's all just completely dulled on the outside because they're in a socioeconomic place where the whole point is you're not supposed to feel like you're feeling anything strong at all.
Yeah, and I think that all of the characters have a level of complexity to them that you don't see. I mean, a lot of movies you don't have one or two characters with that level of complexity, and in here you have multiple characters, and even like somebody like Sigourney Weaver's character, I would not say is like one of the main character. Well, I mean, I guess she is, but she's not part of like the main family, and her character alone has so much complexity where she's clearly unhappy in her life and feels, completely aimless, and she's cheating on her husband with multiple different men. So there's obviously some sort of void in her life. And then you have like Christina Ricci's character who is becoming a woman and like experimenting with her sexuality and stuff like that. And I thought that was a really great, subplot that was happening as well.
Yeah, I just feel like I can't talk about this movie too much at length without like more notes, because then it just becomes just all going through like every scene of the ice storm and talking about it in like tremendous detail at just the proficiency that this script and this director and this cast have at just finding this very particular balance of what you're of just what you're bringing to every scene, which is what you're not just bringing like this character's like unknown backstory. You're bringing the baggage of things we've already seen to it in a way that a lot of movies, once again, a lot of movies would make a show out of what this movie just does implicitly.
And this movie is under 2 hours long too.
And
So
if we want to talk about another movie, like for the opposite reasons and for the opposite effects, once again, another movie that feels much longer than it actually is. And in this case, that's actually probably a good thing.
just now thinking about comparing this to something like the movie we just talked about for the holidays, and how I felt like how all of those characters seemed completely mishandled, and I couldn't get a grasp of really any of them, and they all seemed so frantic and all over the place. And then this movie is just so laser focused on everything that it sets out to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if you're looking for a really great dysfunctional family drama that is incredibly heavy and you haven't seen The Ice Storm yet, check it out.
I really just feel ruined in the best way possible.
Yeah.
That's what The Ice Storm is for. You can watch it while we're still waiting for Marriage Story to come out and hit Netflix.
There you go. You devastated all over again.
Mm-hmm. Although there were a decent number of Thanksgiving-themed movies released throughout the decade, these numbers come nowhere close to the treasure trove of Thanksgiving specials that aired on TV.
This month, we'll be taking a look at 2 of these specials, the first being from a beloved character we all grew up with.
It's Thanksgiving in the 100-Acre Wood, and Winnie the Pooh and his friends are having a feast, so let's all join them in a Winnie the Pooh Thanksgiving.
This Thanksgiving, it's the bestest holiday treat.
Hip, hip, hooray!
Join Pooh Bear and all his friends for a Winnie the Pooh Thanksgiving, ABC 8/7 Central.
This 22-minute special first aired on Thanksgiving Day in 1998 and every year following until 2003. It was made available on home video as part of the Winnie the Pooh Seasons of Giving collection, which was first on VHS but is now available on streaming platforms. This is the version we watched, but we're just going to talk about the Thanksgiving special today. Now, Ken, you were the one that suggested that we cover this one. You're very excited to dive into some Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah, this was one of the like key formative pieces of media of my youth, are just like, especially the like 80s Disney New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh era of Winnie the Pooh, of which this Seasons of Giving collection is taken from. Mm-hmm. So yeah, here's the thing, is that it's almost hard to go back and talk about it because you know, the media someone watches as a kid, it's something that you've watched over and over and over again, and so you just kind of assume it and absorb it on like a almost just like a matching of sensory information level. Like, so I'm gonna rewatch that. So when I'm rewatching this, I'm not like rewatching it as an experience. I'm rewatching and saying, every successive scene, I'm saying, oh, this looks familiar, this looks familiar, this looks familiar. Like it's like that thing where you hear a word over and over and over again, and then it just stops having meaning. So not saying this doesn't have like meaning. I thought it was perfectly fine, but it just felt like, looking at it, it just felt like sounds and images that I was just reabsorbing and processing, except for, now, if we can talk a little bit more about the 2 other specials on this, when we'll get there, then I might offer some more opinion. But what did you think? I
enjoyed it overall. I think that Winnie the Pooh is great, and I think that we all need a little bit of Winnie the Pooh in our lives. I mean, I think that maybe it's always just sort of there, but I feel like, and maybe it's just me, but when I see something like Winnie the Pooh that is just pure, it's so pure and so joyful. I don't know. I feel like we need a lot more of that in today's climate.
He and Paddington are 2 of the best bears.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, I think maybe that's why people love the Paddington movies so much, is because they just bring that lighthearted joy. You know, they remind us of the power of imagination and the just a level of happiness and fun that a lot of us tend to forget about in our daily lives. So it was really enjoyable for me to go back and watch this. I think that now we both did watch the full Seasons of Giving collection here.
Yes, and my take on this is this one, the Thanksgiving one, this is about Rabbit trying to plan this elaborate Thanksgiving. Once again, hilarious to me that this thing that started out as a British literary creation, then Disney became so like Americanized for an American audience that they're celebrating. And Christopher Robin, who is, I don't think, ever been played as anything other than British, are celebrating an American holiday, but never mind. Rabbit's planning this elaborate Thanksgiving holiday because he is very a traditionalist and authoritarian, and then learns that really it's the people and that you value in your life that make for Thanksgiving. It's kind of formless. It's fine. It's whatever. The one before it, this is the second one. The one before it is this actually really solid comedic piece about Groundhog Day, where a bunch of pages get torn off Rabbit's calendar. Everyone thinks it's Groundhog Day, even though it's November. And that caused all sorts of havoc because they're preparing for spring, and it's actually going to snow. The third one on this is about Rabbit like taking in the small baby bird who is about to learn to fly south for the winter, but Rabbit can't handle it because he has empty nest syndrome, and it's devastating.
Yeah, the bird annoyed me. I think that bird.
Oh, I don't care about the bird. I care that this is basically an intense character study of Rabbit. All three of them.
Maybe that's why I didn't like it so much, because I don't like Rabbit very much to begin with.
Rabbit's very traditionalist.
He's just such a curmudgeon. Like you look at the other characters. You look at Tigger, who is just the embodiment of energy and fun and happiness, and you look at Piglet, and yeah, Piglet is a little fraidy cat with everything, but he's just so adorable. And then you look at Pooh, who is just this lovable doofus, and all these characters have these really great qualities about them. And then you have Rabbit, who's just an a-hole all the time. He's just so angry at everything. And I don't know. I just don't think he's the strongest of the characters.
Tracing it to the third one, though, there's almost some momentary Rabbit character development because he has to gradually learn over the last one is like must be the longest segment out of the three, because usually these would be like 2 12-minute segments. This one is a full half hour. It involves Rabbit like trying to hold this like baby bird whose name I can't remember even though it's clearly time for her to fly south for the winter and establish independence, but he can't let go. And then he eventually has a breakdown over it. There's this scene of him just like sitting and like in like dark silence crying in his room while the bird is very solemnly reflecting in front of the fire. And it feels like something out of the Ice Storm or something for a while. And then eventually, and this is the real kicker of this, it goes to and then it cuts to like Rabbit eventually realizes it is time to let go. The bird flies away. Everyone in the 100-acre wood sees her off. Then there's the scene of Pooh and Piglet just sitting, looking out the sunset as they often do in that wonderful little perch atop the 100-acre wood. And Pooh just says, out of nowhere, sometimes people care too much, and I think that's called love. And that's where it ends. That's the last line, basically.
Yeah.
As we said, because of this is a special, there's a wraparound segment that tries to tie it into a holiday. But you think if that's the original episode, that's where the credits roll. The credits just roll on that line. Like I think we said, I was talking about this before we started recording. There are entire like movies that take 2 hours and books that take hundreds of pages and all sorts of other media that take such a long time to arrive at conveying that message that Winnie the Pooh conveys in one line.
But I think that's the best part about Winnie the Pooh, right? That he takes these like really broad, big concepts and just boils them down into super short, digestible tidbits.
I just did not absorb that message at all when I was a kid. Like this is the one I remember the least out of the three. So I'm just wondering, what is the target audience of Winnie the Pooh getting out of that line?
I don't know, frankly.
Because that's kind of a lot to throw on an average episode of like this particular Disney incarnation of Winnie the Pooh, which was, if I remember correctly, usually pretty low stakes. It's like not like The Search for Christopher Robin, which was a direct-to-DVD one some years later, where they go searching for Christopher Robin who they think is lost, and it turns into like this existentialist thing about, like, in so many words, like something that could be read as like preparing for the loved ones in your life to die.
Well, I thought that the Christopher Robin movie that came out, was that last year?
Yeah. Huh?
I thought that one was way too dark and depressing for Winnie the Pooh.
I think Winnie the Pooh does have. Winnie the Pooh should not stray from where Winnie the Pooh has tended to go in its modern era. You have to watch the Search for Christopher Robin sometime, because I haven't seen that in ages. But the more I think about it, the more I seem to think that my memory and trying to process it now, I think it's just about like preemptive grief. Like it's about knowing that the people in your life may not always be there, and may like die someday, and you have to be prepared for a life where they're not always going to be in the position that they are.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's fine, but for me, I just want to keep it light and happy,
it should be. I just like that. This is a particular like this very particular strain of like media that is undeniably directed at small children and tries to prime them for a lesson that they're not quite going to understand, but feels like it could like subliminally get in there and provide some later like foundation for understanding something else.
Could be, yeah.
Because well, let's think about it. The first one is the Groundhog Day one is essentially boils down to don't jump to conclusions and be more understanding. The second one is about friends are the most important part of any holiday rather than the tradition. The third one is, I think, like I said, I think it's an allegory for emptiness, and it's just like about like, you know, understanding that certain arrangements and certain like situations in your life aren't permanent, and learning, and just the most important thing sometimes is just learning when to let go.
Yeah, and I think that what we can learn from all of these is that Rabbit is awful, because he's like the villain in all of them.
He really is.
In the Groundhog Day one, he loses he loses it on Piglet, and
Piglet because they tried to dress him up as a groundhog.
Yeah, like that was gonna work, and then Piglet goes out to find a groundhog, and they think that he got lost, and because there was a snowstorm and stuff. So Rabbit is clearly
even this first one's kind of like the ice storm too.
Yeah. Yep. And Piglet is Elijah Wood.
Yeah. Like for a while, they're pretty sure that he is.
They do think that he dies. They think that he melted. Oh man,
I love that. Of course, you as the viewer, you know, as the viewer, you see all the information, and you know that Piglet's not dead. You still do have to go through a weirdly long scene of all the other characters thinking that he is.
Yeah.
And Rabbit having to begin to process the shock of knowing that he inadvertently caused Piglet's death.
Yeah.
Again, this is really great stuff.
And then in the second one, you know, the Thanksgiving one, you have Rabbit blaming everybody else for the ruined Thanksgiving dinner, and then causing everyone to like go to their respective homes and being depressed before he realizes, you know, the true meaning of Thanksgiving and whatever. And then of course the bird one is like we already talked about.
Sufficiently analyzed. Again, I don't know what to say coming back now. Once again, this is one of the foundational like media franchises of the entire way that I as a child digested the outside world. I don't know what that says about me now that we've actually talked about it in some detail.
Well, I think that there could be a lot worse things.
No. Yeah. I'm just thinking, like, I did see some of like the older classic Disney Winnie the Pooh, but most of it, just I guess what was available to me was this like the new Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, like late 80s through the 90s era Disney stuff, which feels strangely distinct from any of like the Winnie the Pooh before it, and I'm guessing whatever they did with it afterwards.
Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking, because as I was watching this, I was thinking that the first two, the Groundhog Day one and the Thanksgiving one, felt a lot different tonally and animation wise, like quality wise, I thought that they were a lot different than the last one, the third one. I thought that the animation quality took a pretty big dive on the bird one, but also the wraparound stuff
which looks completely different.
Yeah, that animation is horrendous.
It is absolutely dreadful.
And they switched out the voices for several of them too. I think the third one had some different voices, and the wraparound one had different voices too. For Eeyore, and Piglet was a different voice. I don't know if Piglet was different in just the wraparound. Yeah, can't remember if his voice was different in the bird one, but it was definitely different in the wraparound, and that was not pleasant either. But then at least it wasn't as bad as the very, very beginning with the CG stuff.
Oh no,
that was so awful.
I do remember that vague sequence when I was younger. Like, it looked familiar to me, and I remember, I think as a kid, just vaguely thinking that it looked odd, and now older, I was thinking, no, my reaction there was revulsion.
Next up, we have a Thanksgiving episode from one of the most critically acclaimed and beloved cartoons of the decade. While we will no doubt be revisiting the show on a later episode, now seems a good time as any to dive into the wonderful and wacky world of the Animaniacs.
Turkey Jerky aired on November 24th, 1993, 46th episode of the season of Animaniacs. In it, the Warner siblings portray Native Americans attempting to protect their pet turkey from Miles Standish, who wants it for dinner. So yeah, this is, I mean, I'm familiar with Animaniacs. I never like a huge viewer of it, but what do you think?
I loved the Animaniacs growing up. I was a big fan of Animaniacs. It was on Fox, and I think there were like new episodes on Saturdays probably, but it was in syndication for a really long time. It was like an after school type of show. So like every day after school, I would go to my babysitter's house and watch Animaniacs. So I was a pretty big fan of it, but I haven't seen any Animaniacs stuff since I was a youngster. So it was kind of fun going back and revisiting the show now as an adult. I appreciate what Animaniacs does. I would say that for me now, it's definitely for kids. It definitely appeals to the sort of ADD riddled children,
Yes.
Like for me now as a cynical adult, it's just like there's too much. Like it's like Home for the Holidays. You guys got to calm down. You just got to take a chill pill here. It's too intense.
There's it just feels like you just look at it and go, like, you want to engage with it on some level, but after a point, there's just so much going on. You just know you can't. You just let it wash over you.
The thing that I've always found interesting about Animaniacs, and maybe more so now as an adult, a lot of the jokes, there's just no way that they can be aimed at children.
Oh no, that's kind of like one of the defining components of Animaniacs' style in a lot of ways, is that there's definitely a lot of humor that is definitely not aimed at kids, which at least makes it more outwardly just strange to watch than like Winnie the Pooh, where it felt like there's just a lot of emotional content there that's not aimed at kids. There's a lot of emotional baggage in Winnie the Pooh that doesn't feel aimed at kids. And with Animaniacs, it's just kind of like very off-color jokes that just hopefully just fly over kids' heads.
Yeah, like early on in the episode, you have this pilgrim, and he's hunting a turkey, and it turns out that it's the Warner brothers and sister. It's their pet turkey, and when they first have an encounter, they talk about turning it into a movie or something, and Dot, who's the Warner sister, says, "Who's gonna play me, Valerie Bertinelli?" And I'm just like, what? Valerie Bertinelli? Like, what kid? Now, this is the 90s. I mean, this, like, I mean, this is 1993, for God's sake. It's like, who is in the writer's room for this show? It's got to be like a 60-year-old man. Valerie Bertinelli.
Valerie Bertinelli. or then they just rattle off other names there too. So it's just like, how kids just love the various stars of mid 90s television films.
But you would think that they would say somebody that a kid would know.
No, why would they?
That's the thing. Like,
that's the easy way out of this, isn't it?
I also thought that and this is something that happens throughout all of the episodes of Animaniacs, their frequent forceful kissing of people. The whole time I'm just thinking, I don't know if that would work now. Like, I don't know.
No.
I don't know if that would stand, if people would be okay with the forceful kissing that occurs in this show.
It's not acceptable. But it's not acceptable. I think there's a knowledge that it was never quite acceptable by this point, but it was just still a device. I mean, I hope we'd all forgotten, but lest we forget when Adrian Brody won the Oscar.
Oh yeah.
And just goes up and just forcefully kisses Halle Berry.
Yes, that was uncomfortable for everyone. Everyone involved.
Bad, just a bad moment.
I think the other thing that sort of struck me coming back to this show now after being away from it for so many years is just how much influence the early Warner Brothers cartoons had on this. The old Bugs Bunny cartoons and stuff like that. Just watching this, and I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that I mean, obviously I knew that it was a Warner Brothers show and everything, but I guess maybe I was just separated from that style of cartoon for so long. Now we're all used to like the kind of the Cal Arts style, and where it's just straight up slapstick, craziness. And coming back to that after all these years was kind of refreshing.
Yeah, it is unambiguously trying to make a connection to that past in more ways than just like the obvious naming connections or appearances of other characters. Like, it is trying to examine the possibility that there's an element to that style that has a universal appeal to it.
I also like when the Pilgrim was they ask him if he's ever had a pet, and he says he had a hamster, and then he took the hamster to bed every night. And Yakko goes, "Good night, everybody."
It's one of the many great good night everybody's of Animaniacs.
Yeah. Because they were implying that man was sleeping with his hamster in a sexual manner. That's what that was. That's what that was all about.
The jokes imply a lot of things on Animaniacs. That's kind of its whole thing.
I also like how they first foil the Pilgrim, and they knock him off a cliff, and they could have just let it be. They got away. They won. But no, they actually went on the offensive and started messing with him after he got back up off the cliff. Like, the turkey started messing with him, and then the Warners started messing with him too. And I started to think, like, maybe the Pilgrim's not the bad guy in this story. Maybe it's what they're doing to him now.
It does come kind of like, you can't linger too long on the takeaways that this episode has on that particular dynamic, because it's why would you want to put yourself in such a deeply discomforting position? But yeah, it's so weird eventually, the weird dynamics that takes, because it just keeps going.
I did appreciate that they called themselves Native Americans and not Indians, though. I thought for sure this was before the Native American Indian thing.
Again.
And they did call themselves Native Americans. So
again, this was just full of like unexpected moments in all sorts of ways.
And he does say at one point, the Pilgrim says, "Give me back my bird," or "Give me the bird." And I think it was Wacko who said, "We'd like to, but the Fox censors won't let us."
Another great moment.
I think that this episode is a great example of what a lot of the episodes are like, where they're constantly breaking the fourth wall and just torturing someone to the point of madness. And I think that's how a lot of the episodes were. The ones that involved the Warner siblings, which I'm glad that this episode didn't have any of the other, because if you remember, Animaniacs wasn't just the Animaniacs; it was like all of those other characters
Yeah.
who were involved and had their own little side stories, like Pinky and the Brain, which they later spun off into their own show, and that squirrel lady, I can't remember her name. That, and then I remember there was the one, it was Mindy. It was like the young girl, like the infant girl, and the dog would always have to go rescue her because she would like escape.
And there's all
Buttons, Mindy and Buttons, I think.
This it's a great and vast network of characters, which kind of just I feel also just further lends to its status as just kind of this, like, a big tent of, dreaded loaded word content. It was just, it almost contributes to it. Like, there is so much going on, there are so many characters, and within one segment there will be so many jokes that a lot of Animaniacs maybe feels dated in a lot of ways, but in terms of just feeling overwhelmed by things, it's still a mood in 2019.
And I thought that like, quality wise, like the quality of the animation, while it does look very 90s, I think that it's still pretty much held up for the most part. Now, I will say that at least on the Turkey Jerky one, now there's the episode that we watched has like 2 segments, and the one that we watched, the Turkey Jerky one, didn't look great. It was on Hulu, so if you have Hulu, you can watch all of these. And by the way, the Winnie the Pooh one was it's only on Vudu, to my knowledge. We rented it on Vudu.
Yeah,
and the quality of the episode was not great at all. Like, there was this weird visual glitch thing that was at the top of the screen. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, was some. It's never great to know. Just like it's always somewhat concerning to think about the copies of things, the prints of things that go to streaming services, which seem somewhat concerning. Just consider the possibility that there just isn't a great pristine print of particular things anywhere. Yeah. It's like on the whole thing with the Universal backlot fire, that just these master recordings of untold numbers of artists from over the decades were lost in a fire 10 years ago, and until very recently Universal just did not let on exactly how damaging the fire was.
Either way, I would say that Animaniacs is still worth going back for just nostalgia's sake. And I think I thought I read somewhere that they were talking about rebooting it.
I've heard that.
I think
I haven't heard anything about it. I've heard that it's allegedly happening.
It might be cool if they did it right.
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg was famously the producer on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the last I read that he was going to be back as an executive producer on the reboot, but I don't know.
It seemed like he was quite firmly attached to it, but there was nothing quite beyond that.
Yeah, I think that it's a show that could easily be rebooted.
Mm-hmm.
I watched the DuckTales reboot on I guess it was the Disney Channel. It's on Disney Plus now. Mm-hmm. And that was I thought they did a really good job with the DuckTales reboot.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see Animaniacs have the same quality.
Yeah, DuckTales was another less formative, but still like another thing that I was very familiar with. So I'm glad that its legacy continues.
Ever wonder what Santa would do without his elves? The Sears Wish Book. Just make a list, check it twice, then call 1-800-366-3000. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every order is backed by Sears, and Sears delivers anywhere. Of course, the elves would never leave Santa holding the bag. But it's nice to know he has a backup plan.
Now, before you continue,
mm-hmm.
First of all, I want to say
that's a Christmas ad.
It is a Christmas ad, but it came out on Thanksgiving.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I actually called that 800 number that they give.
I was hoping you would.
And it's disconnected. So the number's disconnected. But here's the thing. the message that comes up when you call it, it's the same guy who narrated that commercial.
Incredible.
And he's saying that the number is no longer in service.
So it's probably not been in service for well over 2 decades at this point.
Probably. The other thing I wanted to mention is the idea of wish books. This is probably something that you never, I'm just assuming, that you never experienced the joy of a wish book.
What is a wish book?
So a wish book is basically a giant catalog that would be sent out every Christmas. Sears is like the famous one, but other companies like Toys R Us and stuff did it too. And it was just a giant catalog of all of the hot toys and like electronics and stuff like that. And I loved paging through the wish books and looking at all of the toys and stuff like that. And interestingly, in the mail just a couple weeks ago, I got a giant wish book from Amazon. They sent me one. Yeah. And it's all toys.
Yeah, I'm of course like I have had the pleasure of flipping through different like holiday catalogs, but I was just not familiar with the term wish book.
I think that's specifically Sears.
Next up, let's take a look at the sequel to the wildly successful adaptation that began as a comic strip, then a sitcom, then a cartoon series, and more recently, an animated movie. Directed by Barry Sonnenfeld and released on November 19th, 1993, this is Addams Family Values.
I'm going to have a baby right now.
It's the return to tradition.
Welcome home, my son.
It's the return to the great outdoors.
Summer camp.
Our Amanda's already skipped 2 grades. How about your boy?
Probation.
It's the return of family values.
You still desire me, the old ball and chain?
Forever.
I'll get them.
Addams Family Values.
What? I didn't say anything. That's the baby's nickname. What?
Rated PG-13. Starts Friday, November 19th at theaters everywhere.
Siblings Wednesday and Pugsley Addams will stop at nothing to get rid of Pubert, the new baby boy adored by parents Gomez and Morticia. Things go from bad to worse when the new Black Widow nanny, Debbie Jelinski, launches her plan to add Fester to her collection of dead husbands. Ken, what is your familiarity with the Addams Family? Have you seen this one or the original live action one before? Is this like a new exploration for you?
I am somewhat familiar with the TV series. I feel like I've seen part of the first movie at some point, but I don't really remember it. But I will say, this movie is glorious.
Oh, yeah.
I was kind of starting out a little bit middling on it, but by about, I don't know, a third of the way in, I was completely on board and remained so for the entire runtime.
I love this movie. I love the first one. I love this one. I would say that, I don't know, maybe the first one is still the better of the two, but oh my goodness. And I don't know, maybe it's just like revisiting it now. Again, this is a movie I haven't seen for years and years, and I think revisiting it now as an adult, I can appreciate a lot of the jokes more, and maybe also because back when this movie came out, there was it's the Toot era, right? Like everything's edgy back then, and nowadays, we just had that Addams Family animated movie that came out. I didn't see it, but I'm assuming that it's like safe for kids.
Probably.
And this movie it's just, they're not afraid to go really dark with this movie. And that's what I kind of love about it, where, on the surface, you think like, this is it's sort of like an Edward Gorey style of that level of macabre, where it's like, sort of dark, but also sort of fun and kitschy, and like it's okay for not like little kids, but like younger kids to see it, because it's all kind of tongue in cheek and whatever. And in a certain sense, that yes, that is what this is, but a lot of times they go so overboard with a lot of this stuff. I mean, just like small things, like when Fester gets married and it's a dead body that they drag behind their car. when they're when they get married and drive off. Just
Again.
small things like that.
Again, that's a whole 2019 mood.
We all feel like corpses being dragged behind cars.
I almost want to take a screenshot, send it to you, and say same.
Yeah, it's the best because it's like face down. Too.
Oh yeah,
just getting dragged.
Uh-huh.
The one thing that I absolutely adore with this movie is the constant quips and one-liners that everyone in the whole family says, like all the retorts, just rapid fire jokes that every one of them lands. Like they're all so funny. And just like, especially like when they go to the camp and they realize it's like a camp for like what they call like privileged youth. Or something like, and it's all white kids with blonde hair. Oh my god!
I like that there's a whole thing. There is a whole thing where the heads of the camp, played by Peter McNichol and Christine Baranski, who are both completely wonderful in this. They go on this whole lengthy spiel. Literally, that's all it's about. It's about how it's a camp for their term, privileged kids, and yeah, it's pretty great. There's a whole lot in this movie that feels like a 2019 mood, and that's another part. Yeah, that's just what we're calling it. It's a camp for privileged children. I believe what is the slogan of the camp? We're better than you, or something.
Well, the best thing is like when they decide that they want to do the play, which is like a play about the first Thanksgiving, and they give the pilgrims all of the white children. Mm-hmm. The sparkly white children are the pilgrims, and then everyone else, like there's like a kid in a wheelchair, and there's an Asian kid, and there's a black kid, and they're the Native Americans, and of course the Addams kids are also well, they make Pugsley the turkey.
Yeah, all the other kids are basically the prequel to the college admission scandal.
So oh my god.
And of course I do absolutely adore what Wednesday does to the Thanksgiving play.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Again, they are not afraid to go dark with this movie at all. And then you have Joan Cusack as Debbie Jelinski.
Oscar-worthy performance.
She's great in this, and she gets killed too. They kill her.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. She is electrocuted to the point where she just sort of disintegrates.
She burns up into dust.
Yeah, and it's like a single shot that's held for a good 20 seconds of just her just like a pile of dust and forming as she just evaporates, and then of course ends with her credit cards falling onto the pile completely unscathed.
I love the scene when they were showing that like true crime, like unsolved mysteries type show, where they were talking about her and they were showing all the different identities that she had.
America's most disgusting unsolved.
Yeah. And they show like two of her just in different disguises, and then the next one they show is just a picture of Kathy Lee Gifford. And I also like back to the camp, the timeout room that they have to go into, and it's like this little shed that just has like inspirational kitten posters on it, and they freak out because there's there's two Michael Jackson posters on the wall. And it's like, wow, that they didn't really know how accurate they were with that one.
No, that is a joke that accidentally works much better than they could have ever intended it to.
Exactly. Oh, it's just
what an upsetting world we live in.
It is. Yeah. But the Addams family makes it better.
But at least the Addams family can make something out of her.
That's the best part. That's the best part. It's because the Addams family, they see through all the BS. All the BS of the world. So we can all relate to them much more than we can relate to the other people in this movie. Angelica Houston reprising her role as Morticia, just stunning in this. Raul Julia, one of his last roles
Mhm.
as Gomez.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, he was in Street Fighter,
Mhm.
the movie, after this.
That's his last credit, isn't it?
Well, on IMDb, there's like a TV movie, but yeah,
That's the second to last credit, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Christopher Lloyd coming back as Uncle Fester. Joan Cusack. I already mentioned Joan Cusack. Christina Ricci is Wednesday. Carol Kane, Granny. She's great, man. I love Carol Kane.
And
I
more
love
David Krumholtz.
And more David Krumholtz as Joel Glicker.
I'm sorry, what were you saying about Carol Kane?
I was saying that I love that Carol Kane continues to get work. Like that
Yes.
she's still anytime she pops up in a movie or a TV show, I'm just like, yes.
Yeah, yes,
It's
absolutely.
gonna be funny.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a really great cast in here as well. And it's just so much fun. I just adore this movie.
It's wonderful.
Again, I think that the first one works a little bit better, but the writing in this is still just on point. And I just love the ambiance of this movie. I love the look of their house. I love the clothes that they wear. Like when they go to that bistro, that like weird underground bistro thing. And then of course the wedding when everybody in the extended family shows up. It's all just so great. This is a movie that like the other ones, I think holds up tremendously well over time.
Absolutely.
I like during the wedding scene, Wednesday was the flower girl, and she just had a basket of rocks.
Excellent. Also very good.
And of course, I'd be remiss if I did not mention Whoop, the Addams Family. There it is. One of the most perplexing
What a
original
choice.
theme songs.
What a choice. The movie ends and I'm kind of just like, sitting there, and then that starts on the credits, and I just like, I'm not really watching the credits. I'm just listening to that intently.
It's bizarre.
I was listening to it with the like directness, like in my ears, like trying to parse every syllable of what was happening. I don't know, like it was like the Nixon tapes or something.
And it's so poorly done too. I mean, obviously Tag Teams Whoop, There It Is was a huge hit on the radio.
But it does not organically involve the Addams Family, and that's the problem here.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the people behind the studio were like, okay, what's charting now? What's the big hit song? Oh, Whoop, There It Is. Okay, well, let's get Tag Team to make the theme song for the Addams Family. But they didn't give them any kind of guidelines or anything. They were just like, hey, you want to make the theme song? And they're like, yeah, sure. And then they just changed the lyrics to Whoop, the Addams Family. There it is. They put in there's so little effort put into that song. It's astounding.
Wait, did you see this in the theater?
I did see it in the theater.
So you don't have to imagine just sitting there in the theater after it's over and then hearing that sounds just enveloping you.
I actually remember that moment.
I can't imagine you forget
in theater. I just turned 10, and I'll never forget it.
Yeah, I can't imagine you would. That sounds like a formative moment.
Still, I mean, just we've been talking about doing a soundtrack episode for a long time. This has to be.
Now we were talking about a soundtrack episode. Now it's just going to be an episode entirely about Whoop, the Addams Family. There it is.
Oh my god,
it'll be longer than our double length episode back earlier in the year.
At any rate, I would highly recommend checking out Addams Family Values and the first one too. Just seem in order.
Absolutely, Addams. I haven't. I'll have to rewatch the first movie, but I give this one also a very, very good recommendation.
Our last title this month makes for a nice transition into the Christmas season with its depiction of both winter holidays. A huge success at the box office, the film would go on to receive 2 sequels, though each would not receive the same level of praise. Directed by John Pasquin and released on November 11th, 1994. This is the Santa Claus.
Hey, you! This Christmas, Scott Calvin's getting into the spirit the only way he can.
You killed him.
Did not. By accident.
If something should happen to me, put on my suit. The reindeer will know what to do.
On November 11th, get ready for the greatest holiday adventure of all.
You're the new Santa. What? You put on the suit, you're the big guy.
I shave in the morning and the afternoon. I look like this.
Oh, my God.
What? You put on a little weight. Does this look like a little weight to you?
Walt Disney Pictures presents Tim Allen.
I've seen you at lunch. Have a piece of fruit, for God's sake.
The Santa Claus.
If we go straight on this road, we hit I-94.
Rated PG. Starts Friday, November 11th at a theater near you.
Scott Calvin is an ordinary man who accidentally causes Santa Claus to fall from his roof on Christmas and is knocked unconscious. When he and his young son finish Santa's trip and deliveries, they go to the North Pole, where Scott learns that he must become the new Santa and convince those he loves that he is, indeed, Father Christmas. So...
He doesn't knock him unconscious, he kills him. Let's be clear.
Like, I don't know what kind of euphemistic nonsense was in that plot description. He kills Santa Claus.
I mean, they don't say, they straight up pretty much say it in the movie that he kills him. Like, there's no...
Yeah.
Come on.
It's I like that that's kind of how it starts, really. That's like the instigating event is not merely we need a new Santa, it's that you killed Santa.
What did you... I take it you've seen this movie before.
Yes, I am quite familiar with it.
I think this is one of these holiday classics that's always on TV. I think pretty much everybody's seen the Santa Claus at this point. It's been many years since I've seen it. I feel like I probably watched it on TV not terribly long ago. I mean, it's certainly been... I saw it in the theater. I was 10, and I'm sure I've seen it since then many times, but I thought I was going to really not like this one. Out of all the titles that we had in the lineup this month, I was not looking forward to this one the most because I felt like I was really familiar with it, and I was just like, I don't feel like watching this movie again. But I will say that going back and watching it now, I don't know. I think I have just a greater appreciation for it. And I think maybe it's just not as horrendous as I originally thought it was.
No, yeah. I can't say that I had a particularly strong connection to this. I thought it was competent, though. It's just moving from element to element throughout the plot. It felt kind of weirdly paced after a while. Like it moves through levels of time at extremely different speeds, but I mean, it's not awful. I mean, it's often quite good.
I will agree with the pacing. It's judging time in this movie is just impossible. None of it makes any sense. And the passage of time between the sequels too, that's even more like confusing and slightly incomprehensible. There were just certain small, almost nuanced moments of this that I forgot about that watching it now, I really enjoyed. Like the scene at Denny's, I think that was my favorite scene in the whole movie, actually. When
it's such a great scene.
So so Tim Allen plays Scott Calvin, and he works at a toy company. He's divorced. He has his son Charlie, played by Eric Lloyd, over for Christmas Eve, and he burns the turkey in a very Home Improvement style fashion, which again, if we want to get into nitpicks with this one, the inclusion of like the grunting from Home Improvement and a few other like kind of nods to Home Improvement, I'm just like, come on now, like I get that was like Tim Allen's shtick.
But really playing into this being the a key era in Tim Allen. Tim Allen.
Can you imagine if they did that in Toy Story? They had Buzz Lightyear.
Toy Story is much that.
Oh man, that would be hilarious. So anyway, he burns the turkey, so they end up going out and looking for a restaurant that's open. The only thing they can find is Denny's.
Denny's.
And there's like this like Japanese business meeting there, like, or some sort of conference or something, and they're all eating there. And he tells the hostess that he burned the turkey, and she's like, okay, right, this way. And they go in, and it's a whole room of single dads and their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of, they all look at each other and they give like the slight nod.
Mm-hmm.
I just love that scene. I think it's so funny.
I also like the back and forth that they are out of everything because it is Christmas Eve.
Yeah. And when he goes, I'll have chocolate milk, please. And she goes, we're out of chocolate milk. And he just goes, regular milk's fine.
It's such a great line reading too.
Yeah. So there's, I don't know. I think that there's just a lot of really good moments in this. I think that they are often overshadowed by the more kind of typical slapstick, goofball, live action Disney kind of garbage that company was known for in the 90s.
Metamorphizing into Santa Claus.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, I did want to get into the special effects work in this, because oh boy, does that look dated.
Not good.
My God.
Not good.
Yeah. Oh my God. I know that I said that I thought that all these movies held up, but one caveat that I'll leave is that the effects work in Santa Claus does not hold up. I don't even think it was good for the time, honestly.
Yeah, I was thinking there was better stuff coming out at that time. It's not like this was good then and bad now. This was always, I assume, bad.
Yeah, I mean, this is like early days of CG, so it's they were still figuring it out. Mm-hmm. They were still working out the kinks of CG stuff back then. Overall, though, I mean, I think the movie itself looks good. Mm-hmm. It's funny because like I was watching this and I was thinking to myself, man, you know why I think it looks really good? Because it was shot on film, and it's so rare that you see a movie shot on film these days. Uh-huh. And it's the sequels were also shot on film, and my wife actually commented, and she was like, do they shoot movies on film anymore? Because this looks so much better. Like it's mm-hmm. And yeah, and so I think that was actually a large part of it.
It's also, yeah, it's like I look back and I like on YouTube, for the last like couple of years or so, like there's been an official like NBC YouTube account for Law and Order, and they've been uploading like basically like in clip form, but basically like entire Law and Order episodes, starting with like season 1, episode 1, like 1990, on film, and it just looks so good.
Oh yeah,
because it's like HD. It's like it looks great.
Yeah, I mean, people forget that all of those older TV shows were shot on film, so they hold up. And then you can see like when they switch the show over to digital, and you're just like, oh no, because it was like early digital too, which is even worse.
I think we mentioned this, but well, I know we did. We talked about it when talking about the history of the adaptations of Stephen King's Carrie, but there's like an early 2000s TV miniseries adaptation that is on 2002 era digital video. It looks atrocious. Like, it straight up doesn't even look like... It looks like a really low-budget reality show.
Actually, I would like to do an episode on movies that made the leap to digital, like these early.
Yeah, like they did it way
movies.
too early.
I would love to do an episode on that. I'm gonna have to do some research. Getting back to the Santa Claus, there was an interesting dynamic at the beginning of the movie where it's sort of reversed, where Tim Allen's character of Scott is trying to keep his kids' imagination alive, and usually it's like the other way around, right? Like the kid is the one who's still believing in Santa Claus, and it's the cynical adult who is like telling him to grow up. And it's his ex-wife and Neil, Judge Reinhold's character, like the stepdad, who are telling him that he needs to give up believing in Santa and all this stuff. So I thought that was kind of interesting. they do kind of steer away from that after the initial scene where he goes to the North Pole and stuff, and then he starts being the cynical one again. But I don't know. I thought that was kind of an interesting take on it. The same, also the family dynamic where this is a couple who is divorced, but they're still somewhat amicable with each other. And in the sequels, which I will say I did watch the Santa Claus 2 and 3 in preparation for this.
Isn't that what Disney Plus is for?
Exactly. And in the sequels, they're even like more friendly with each other to the point of the third one where they're like all just one big family.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's cool that's I mean, that's not something that was very well represented during this time.
Yeah, it is.
To be clear, divorce was represented a lot back then, but just not to the same degree as this, where they were sort of still friendly with each other.
Mm-hmm. So and of course, as your completionist, we all give you immense credit every month for watching all of the terrible sequels to the movies we discuss on the show.
Yeah, so the second one, Santa Claus 2, that's the Mrs. Claus. So he discovers that he needs to find a wife in like 3 days or something, because if he doesn't find a wife and create a Mrs. Claus, then he loses all of his Santa Claus powers. So it's all about him trying to find a wife, and he ends up meeting his Charlie's principal and gets married to her. And it's not good. It's to be clear, it's not very good, but everybody returns in the sequel, like even like Judge Reinhold and all of them. Eric Lloyd, who's like this kind of he makes it another kind of subplot, is that he ends up on the naughty list because he's acting out in school, and he's like a graffiti artist. He's tagging up the school.
Does David Krumholtz return for the sequels?
He does not. He's
in everything else, apparently.
Yeah. He's in the second one, but he's not in the third one.
How disappointing.
Yeah. He's the only one who doesn't, only one of the main characters who doesn't return. He returns for 2. Now, in the first one, he has dreadlocks. And in the second one, he just has like curly hair. So something happened with his hairdo. But the second one also involves like Santa making a clone of himself, but he's like a toy. So like his beard and stuff and hair is like made of plastic, and then like the toy version of him sort of takes over the North Pole and turns into this like general. It almost turns into the plot of the movie Toys, actually, with Robin Williams. And it's pretty rough, that one, but it's nowhere near as rough as the Santa Claus 3, which is subtitled The Escape Clause.
I just love that there's a third one, and it was theatrically released, and everybody's in it again.
That one stars that brings everybody back, but it also has Martin Short as Jack Frost. See, this is another thing that the sequels introduce, is that they bring in all of the other like legendary characters. So you have like Aisha Tyler playing Mother Nature, and you have like the Sandman and all the Easter Bunny and all those characters. And it's kind of cool, I guess, but it's done in such a dopey way that it was just not great. But which is funny, because like in the second one, Jack Frost isn't even like a character, and in the third one he's just there, which is something that happens in the second one, where all of a sudden Judge Reinhold and his and Scott's ex-wife, they have a kid who's like 10 years old, and it's like, where did this kid come from?
As you said, again, playing into the Santa Claus cinematic universes. That's my new thing now, is that I since the corporate speak is so completely decimating how we talk, it's not a series, it's a cinematic universe now. SCCU's conception of time is just completely wild.
It's way off. And then in the third one, it's his wife, Mrs. Claus, is pregnant and she's about to give birth, and it's around Christmas time, and Santa's like so busy with dealing with the getting ready for, to deliver the toys and all of that. His son Charlie's barely in it. He's in it for like 2 or 3 scenes, and then the big thing is that Carol's parents come to visit her in the North Pole because she's about to give birth, and they trick them into thinking that they're in Canada and not the North Pole. So they have like Canadian flags everywhere, and they tell the elves to all say like A and stuff. It's so bad. And then her parents are played by Alan Arkin and Anne Margaret.
Mm-hmm.
And it is incredible. Alan Arkin is so good in the Santa Claus 3. He is so funny. Like his role alone almost makes me want to say, watch the Santa Claus 3 just for Alan Arkin, because he's so funny in it. Like genuinely laugh out loud funny. His reactions.
That's always so confusing when there's a terrible movie with like an incredible performance in it and you just don't know what to do about it.
But overall, the basic plot of that one is that Jack Frost is tired of being like a nobody when it comes to the legendary figures, and he decides to try to take over Santa's job. And I guess there's like the escape clause where if Santa grabs this like specific snow globe and wishes that he was never Santa, then time reverses, and
again this franchise in time.
Yeah. So what happens is Jack Frost tricks him into wishing that he was never Santa. So he ends up going back to the night of the first Santa Claus movie. And Jack Frost is the one who yells and kills Santa, and then puts on the coat, and then he becomes Santa. Then, okay, so then it jumps to, so we're at 12 years ago now, the night of the original Santa Claus. Then it jumps forward 10 years later, and now, like, I guess he just lost time.
Mm-hmm.
Like he didn't have to live those 10 years. Like all of a sudden he wakes up and it's 10 years later, and like his whole reality is like changed because of this.
This is like Back to the Future sequels.
It is utterly ridiculous. It is not good, except for Alan Arkin. But overall, I gotta say, I mean, as far as Christmas movies go, and to be clear, so when we were talking about what movies to pick for this, we were both like, okay, well, apparently there's a bunch of Thanksgiving stuff in the Santa Claus. And I didn't remember that, but I was like, all right, let's go for it. There's like no Thanksgiving stuff.
It does not exist.
There's, even though it's listed, like I looked on numerous lists of Thanksgiving movies, this is listed, and I was reading like, in the Wikipedia plot summary, it talks about how he has to get ready on Thanksgiving and all of this stuff. And it's like, they don't even, and maybe they mention Thanksgiving in passing, but not, I don't even think they do. I think it just goes from Christmas right to Christmas the next year. But anyway,
well, it's too late to do anything about it now, except maybe go back in time to 1994 and make someone, I don't know, we have to fall off a roof and then assume the role of screenwriters of the Santa Claus and give it more Thanksgiving content.
There's an idea. I would never put this on my Christmas rotation, like I would never watch this on an annual basis.
No.
Especially the sequels, but every once in a while, I don't think it's terrible to revisit it. I could have sworn I saw the second one before, but watching it, I didn't remember anything about it, so I don't think I saw the second one before. I also thought the Santa Claus 3 I thought that was straight to video for sure, but
Nope.
Somehow, like you said, somehow it ended up in theaters.
Not only was it in theaters, it made $111 million.
Yeah, on a $12 million budget. Ugh.
If only thing, the only surprise there that there was a fourth.
Yeah, I can't believe there hasn't been a fourth, really. I should mention, we didn't talk about this during the Addams Family discussion, but they did make a third Addams Family movie, but it didn't have anybody from the original cast in it, and it was straight to video.
And yet the Santa Claus has 3 central cast, like the same core cast, all theatrical, all hits.
Yeah, the original one was $22 million. That had a much bigger budget, and it grossed $190 million.
Yeah, I think there's something really interesting here. I almost do wonder if the third Santa Claus was meant to be direct to video, because Santa Claus, the budget is 22. Santa Claus 2, the budget's 65. Santa Claus 3, the budget's 12.
Yeah, something tells me that was going to be straight to video. It feels straight to video, like when you watch it. Now, the Santa Claus 2, you can tell that it had a bigger budget because almost like a lot of the Santa Claus 2 takes place on the North Pole. So you have those like really big sets, and the effects work in the second one is not good, to be clear, but a lot better than in the first one. I really hated the design of the like robot Santa, the toy Santa thing, though. I hated that look. I also hated the way that Martin Short looked in the third one.
I'm now completely fascinated by whatever the process was to make them put out the Santa Claus 3 as a theatrical release when it clearly sounds like it was not meant to be one. It's like the last High School Musical movie where they just out of nowhere decided to like triple the budget and make it a theatrical film that did really well.
That's another idea for a show where we have sequels that were in theaters but either weren't planned on being in theaters or probably shouldn't have been in theaters, like Home Alone 3. I'm pretty sure Home Alone 3 was in theaters.
Perhaps I just have the High School Musical franchise on the brain because so a quick note is that we are recording this episode slightly before you hear. We're recording it like the week Disney Plus launched, and maybe I just have it on the brain because ever since I first heard the title High School Musical, the series, it is stuck in the forefront of my brain like nothing else has.
I guess with Disney Plus, they're still like working out their like algorithmic profile of what I'm interested in watching, because it's every time I boot up the app, it's recommending me that show.
Let's be clear, that would be at the top of the algorithm for me, not for you, by what I gather. So
no, I have never seen any of those movies, and I never plan on it.
It's gotten good reviews. Maybe it's also that thing with streaming services where, one, it's new, obviously, so they don't really quite know, and two, it's like thing when you like log into Netflix sometimes, and just no matter who, just basically for almost everybody, they'll be pushing arbitrary original they decided to push for whatever reason they're pushing it that week, and so it's like you log in, nope, this is our flagship thing.
Could be. I mean, they only have a few original things right now.
Yeah, they're banking like a ton on this like High School Musical, the series, which I love saying the full title of.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's probably, at least right now, that's like their second tentpole. You know, you have the Star Wars, the Mandalorian as that's the big one.
Yeah,
you know, that's the one that's selling the subscriptions.
Oh yeah. But this one they're giving way more of a focus to than I would have ever imagined that they would. Maybe they were just taken by like everybody at least on my Twitter feed. I remember I was actually checking Twitter that day when they were announcing all these things, and people not being quite understanding how like convoluted not only the title but the premise is. It's not like in the universe of the High School Musical franchise. It's in a universe where it exists as a property, and it's a mockumentary about like high school kids performing it as their school musical. It's a lot.
I mean, I took the title as a joke. Like they were like,
it's obviously an insane title.
it seemed like, oh, this is probably some sort of kind of goofy, parody film or series or something like that. Like I never thought that they were like making it that title in earnest,
No, you couldn't.
I don't know.
I'd like to think you couldn't. I think there's definitely a universe where someone does. You might say that, but yeah, now I'm thinking. Apparently, still the working title of the sequel to The Hitman's Bodyguard is The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. So,
oh God Almighty, that is so bad.
You think someone like there's the marketing firms that's job it is to give things good, understandable names, but they don't have that for the titles of fictional works. No one's stepping in and going, The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard could use a little work. I assume they will change that.
Let's hope. Let's hope.
There's no release date on it now. It might never come out.
Yeah, it might not. They might have scrapped the whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? This isn't working. Just
we can't get over the title.
Just forget it.
It says that they've shot it. I'd like to imagine maybe they just came in and shut down production just because they couldn't figure out a better title. Like mid-take, some executive rolls in and says, shut it down. It's done.
All right, I think that's going to do it for this month. Thank you so much for listening. Feel free to contact us at 90s@filmpulse.net and let us know what 90s topics you want to hear us cover. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at 90spod for daily 90s goodness. And if you get a moment, consider giving us a review on your podcast platform of choice. That would be awesome. Until next month, I hope you all have an amazing Thanksgiving. For Ken Bakley, my name's Adam Patterson. This has been Saved by the 90s.
Bye, everyone.